Tonight, we explore the origin of morality, not as a set of commandments and not as a rigid system of rules, but as a story, a biological story, an evolutionary story, a cultural story, a psychological and spiritual story, a story written in the nervous system, encoded in our emotions, carried through our ancestors, and expressed in the choices we make every day. As you settle into this journey, you might allow your shoulders to soften a little. Let the breath fall naturally. There is no need to force anything. This is a long exploration, a gentle unfolding of ideas, and it is perfectly fine to relax as the story expands. Imagine the world as it was millions of years ago. Vast plains, thick forests, the distant thunder of predators, early hominins moving in small groups, learning to depend on one another, not only for survival, but for solace, comfort, and connection. Life was dangerous. But even then, sparks of cooperation were already forming. A shared glance during a hunt, a gesture of reassurance to a frightened child, a moment of sharing precious food. These were not yet moral systems as we know them, but the seeds of something that would later grow into the complex gardens of ethics that guide modern life. This question, the origin of morality, has puzzled scientists, philosophers, theologians, and storytellers for centuries. How did right and wrong enter the human world? What pressures shaped our capacity for empathy? Why do we care about fairness, loyalty, harm, and justice? How did a species shaped by survival and competition come to value kindness, compassion, and sacrifice? Tonight, we trace this path through time and mind. We explore how evolution sculpted the early instincts for cooperation, how the brain developed the circuitry for empathy, how tribes created norms and rules, how stories became vessels for moral lessons, how religions shaped collective conscience, how philosophers refined the language of ethics, and how modern psychology reveals both the light and shadow within human moral behavior. Along the way, you may notice moments of silence in the narrative. These pauses are invitations to breathe, to reflect, and to let the ideas settle. There is no pressure, only an open landscape of thought. Morality is not a single invention. It is a tapestry woven from biology, culture, emotion, fear, love, and the quiet desire to live in a world where our actions matter. It is the thread that connects us to our ancestors and the thread we pass on to future generations. And so, as the horizon of this journey opens, allow yourself to step toward it. Feel the calm curiosity of a traveler preparing to explore not only the world around them, but the world within. Ahead lies the story of how morality began, how it changed, and how it continues to evolve. Let us begin. The first moral instincts. To understand the origin of morality, we need to step back into the deep evolutionary past. Not hundreds of years, not thousands, but millions. Step into a world before nations, before cities, before written words, before myth or ritual or philosophy. A world where early hominins moved through shifting landscapes with a mixture of caution and curiosity, driven by hunger, survival, and the quiet beginnings of social connection. Picture the early African savanna at dawn. The air cool, the grasses trembling with wind, the distant call of animals echoing across an open plain. In this world, life depended on the ability to forage, hunt, protect, and cooperate. A lone individual could not survive for long. Predators lurked in tall grasses. Storms swept across the land. Food sources changed with the seasons. The world was vast, unpredictable, and indifferent. Yet, amid this uncertainty, small groups of early humans began to form bonds. They groomed one another. They shared warmth. They protected infants with communal vigilance. They recognized patterns in each other's behavior, learning to predict intent, to sense danger, to understand subtle cues. In these early interactions, long before moral language existed, the faint outlines of proto-morality were emerging. Let the mind settle into this ancient landscape for a moment. Allow the breath to slow. Let the shoulders loosen a little. Imagine you are observing these early groups not with judgment, but with curiosity, as if watching the earliest rehearsal of a long human drama. Even among animals today, we see behaviors that resemble early moral instincts. Wolves share food with injured pack members. Elephants stand vigil over the dying. Dolphins rescue one another from harm. Primates protest unfairness and comfort distressed companions. These behaviors are not fully moral in the human sense, but they reveal something deeper than instinct alone. They show the evolutionary foundations of cooperation and care. It is easy to think of evolution as a process driven by competition alone, but cooperation is just as central. A species that learns to help one another gains an advantage. Individuals who support their group increase the survival chances of their offspring. Trust and cooperation become valuable resources, just like food, shelter, or water. This is where the earliest moral instincts began to form. Not out of philosophical reflection, but out of necessity, out of connection. Out of the simple fact that life is easier, safer, and more successful when we care for one another. Imagine a small band of early humans gathering at the edge of a fire. The flames crackle against the darkness, painting flickering patterns on ancient faces. One member returns from hunting with an injured leg. Another offers food. Another brings water. Another sits close, providing warmth and comfort. No laws compel this behavior. No belief system requires it. It is a natural expression of the value each individual holds within the group. It is an early moral scaffold, a structure rising from shared vulnerability and mutual dependence. These early instincts, kindness, protection, sharing, were shaped not by culture alone, but by natural selection. Individuals who felt empathy were more likely to invest in their offspring. Groups with cooperative members were more resilient. Over thousands of generations, these tendencies deepened. Neural pathways thickened. Emotional responses became more refined. What began as a practical advantage slowly became a cornerstone of human social life. But morality is not only about kindness. It is also about boundaries, expectations, and the consequences of breaking trust. Even early groups would have noticed when someone took more than their share, when someone refused to help, when someone acted in ways that endangered the group. These early judgments were not yet moral rules, but raw reactions to behaviors that threatened cooperation. As night falls on the ancient savannah, imagine a quiet moment. A child cries softly. A mother comforts them. Another adult reaches out, placing a hand on the mother's shoulder. In that simple gesture, we see the origins of something monumental, a species beginning to feel the emotional weight of others, a species beginning to recognize that survival is not merely physical but relational, a species awakening to the idea that actions matter. Allow a small breath here, a moment to absorb the idea that morality did not appear suddenly. It grew slowly, like a seed pushing its way into the soil. A seed nourished by fear, by love, by hunger, by danger, and by the simple truth that life becomes richer when shared. From these earliest sparks came the building blocks of everything that would follow. Cooperation led to empathy. Empathy led to shared emotions. Shared emotions led to the subtle recognition that harming another harms the group. And as these instincts grew, morality began to take shape long before humans gave it a name. Now, with this foundation laid, we move gently into the second great chapter of the story, the rise of empathy, the moment when humans not only acted together, but felt together. The moment when the emotional worlds of individuals began to merge, giving birth to one of the most powerful forces in human evolution. Empathy emerges. Empathy is one of humanity's most remarkable abilities, a bridge between minds that allows us to feel the echoes of another's experience. It did not appear suddenly or fully formed. It arose slowly, through countless generations of mothers soothing their children, companions alert to one another's distress, and communities strengthened by shared emotion. To understand empathy, imagine once more the ancient landscapes where early humans lived. Imagine a small group resting beneath the shade of a large acacia tree. The sun is high, the air is warm. A young member of the group slips and injures their hand on a sharp stone. The sound of their cry ripples through the group, and instantly others turn toward them. Faces shift, bodies move. The distress of one becomes the concern of many. This moment is simple, but it reveals a profound truth. The pain felt by one individual now affects the entire group. This is the beginning of empathy. Take a slow breath here, letting your attention soften. Empathy, even in its early form, served as a survival mechanism, but it also laid the groundwork for something much deeper. It shaped the inner emotional life of our species. Modern neuroscience reveals that when we see someone in pain, areas of our own brain involved in processing pain activate in response. Mirror neurons, discovered in primates and implicated in human social behavior, help us recognize actions, emotions, and intentions in others. They allow us to internalize what we observe, to feel it as if it were happening within our own body. Imagine early hominins developing this neural mirroring slowly over time. A mother senses her infant's discomfort without words. A hunter notices a companion limping and instinctively adjusts their pace. A group member sees another's fear and becomes alert, preparing to protect the vulnerable. These small responses, repeated over countless lifetimes, began to sculpt the early architecture of empathy. But empathy is more than emotional resonance. It is connection. It encourages individuals to help, not out of obligation, but out of understanding. Empathy invites us to step outside ourselves for a moment and see the world through another's eyes. Picture a group gathered around a fire at dusk. The orange glow warms their skin, casting long shadows on the ground. A young member of the group sits quietly, eyes distant, perhaps grieving or frightened. Another individual notices. They sit closer. They offer a quiet sound of reassurance or simply remain present. In this gentle act, a bond is strengthened. Empathy becomes not only a reaction to pain, but a gesture of care, a way of saying, "I am here with you." Allow your breath to settle as you imagine this scene. Empathy often emerges in moments of stillness, when one heart recognizes the trembling of another. As the human brain evolved, empathy became more sophisticated. Early humans not only shared emotions, but also began to perceive intentions. They learned to predict behavior, to understand when someone acted out of fear, aggression, or goodwill. This growing sensitivity allowed groups to develop deeper trust. Trust made cooperation easier. Cooperation increased survival, and the cycle continued, shaping both biology and culture. Consider how empathy influences group dynamics. Individuals who consistently help others earn respect and support. Those who fail to respond to distress risk being ostracized. Empathy thus becomes both an emotional and a social force. It binds a group together, creating a shared emotional landscape that guides decisions and shapes identity. As ancient humans expanded across continents, facing new dangers and new opportunities, empathy helped them maintain cohesion. It encouraged them to care for the elderly, the sick, and the injured. It allowed them to teach, to learn, and to form lasting relationships. It turned survival into community. And empathy did something else, something extraordinary. It opened the door to moral imagination. With empathy, humans could imagine not just instant consequences, but emotional ones. They could anticipate how their actions might affect others. They could feel guilt, pride, shame, and compassion. These emotions became the raw materials of early moral intuition. Let yourself notice a gentle pause here, a moment of reflection, as if standing at the edge of a vast river of shared emotion that flows through all of human history. Empathy connects us to our ancestors as surely as it connects us to one another. Empathy also made early humans more adaptable. Groups who understood the emotional lives of their members could communicate more effectively. They could solve conflicts before they escalated. They could raise children in nurturing environments. They could mourn their dead and celebrate their living. Empathy created culture. Imagine a child watching an elder comfort someone in distress. The child learns not through words, but through observation. The gesture becomes a model. The behavior becomes a pattern. Over generations, empathy becomes tradition. Tradition becomes expectation. Expectation becomes moral instinct. This is how empathy deepened into something larger, a shared emotional fabric that allowed humans to connect not only with those they knew, but also with strangers, a foundation for hospitality, alliance, and eventually the vast moral systems that guide societies today. As we leave this chapter of emotional resonance, we move toward the next layer of moral evolution. Once empathy emerged, groups needed structures to maintain harmony. They needed shared expectations, subtle rules and customs that shaped how individuals behaved. Now we step gently into the rise of social norms, group identity, and the early frameworks of right and wrong that formed the moral architecture of tribes and rules. With the emergence of empathy, early humans were no longer simply surviving as individuals. They were surviving as groups, and groups, by their very nature, require structure. They require shared expectations that keep chaos at bay and allow cooperation to flourish. These expectations were not yet formal laws, but they were rules nonetheless, unwritten, unspoken, and deeply felt. Imagine a small tribe moving together through a dense forest at dawn. Dew clings to the leaves. Birds stir in the branches above. The tribe walks in a loose formation, each person aware of the others. They share responsibilities, from foraging to watching for predators. They rely on one another for safety, nourishment, and comfort. In this quiet choreography, rules are already at play. Rules of sharing, rules of turn-taking, rules of respect. These rules are not enforced with written codes, but with the subtle rhythms of group life. Take a gentle breath here, letting the idea settle. Human morality did not begin with commandments carved in stone. It began with a simple need to live together without tearing one another apart. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies today observe that these groups rely heavily on social norms to maintain harmony. Early humans likely lived in much the same way. Norms regulated how food was divided, how disputes were handled, how elders were treated, how children were raised, and how the group responded to danger. Violating these norms could disrupt the delicate balance of group cooperation, so early humans developed ways to address conflicts long before the creation of formal systems. Picture a scene by the fire in the evening. The group gathers to share a meal. One member takes more than their share of a rare and precious food source. The others notice. There is a shift in the atmosphere, a silent acknowledgement of a violation. A subtle tension forms. Someone might tease the transgressor gently. Another might frown or shake their head. These reactions are not punishments in the strict sense, but reminders. Social cues that say, "We noticed. This is not how we do things here." This natural form of regulation is one of the earliest expressions of moral order. It keeps the group aligned. It reinforces expectations. It shapes behavior not through force, but through belonging and reputation. And belonging was everything. To be part of a tribe meant safety. It meant access to food, shelter, protection, and companionship. Being cast out meant facing the world alone, a fate early humans rarely survived. This made social cohesion essential. It encouraged cooperation and discouraged selfishness. In this way, the earliest moral rules were tied to the need for group unity. Allow a moment to breathe here, noticing the simplicity and depth of this reality. Morality emerged in part because humans realized that life is easier when we get along. The rise of tribes also meant the rise of group identity. Humans began to see themselves as members of a collective. This collective had shared rituals, shared symbols, shared stories, and shared expectations. The group offered meaning and purpose. It offered a sense of home. With group identity came the beginnings of insider and outsider dynamics. Those within the tribe were bound by mutual obligations. Those outside were treated with curiosity, caution, or sometimes hostility. This duality became another layer of early moral thinking. Loyalty to one's group became a central value. Protection of kin and clan became a moral duty. Outsiders were treated according to norms shaped by ecological pressures, cultural experiences, and emotional instincts. These early rules shaped everything from daily behavior to long-term relationships. They influenced who was trusted, who was respected, who was punished, and who was praised. The group rewarded generosity, courage, and cooperation. It disapproved of greed, cowardice, and betrayal. These patterns were not philosophical theories. They were lived experience molded by necessity. Imagine a young member of the tribe observing all of this, watching how adults share food, how conflicts are resolved, how elders are listened to, how boundaries are enforced. Over time, the child internalizes these patterns. They become part of identity, woven into the developing nervous system. As the child grows, these internalized rules guide their decisions. They become moral instincts. Let your breath soften as you imagine the warmth of a fire, the murmur of voices, the quiet learning that happens simply by being present in a group. Morality, at this stage, is not taught as a concept. It is absorbed as a way of life. Over many generations, these norms became increasingly sophisticated. Groups developed unspoken systems, of fairness, reciprocity, trust, and conflict resolution. They created rituals to reinforce cooperation. They used stories to teach values. They passed down shared wisdom through elders who carried memory like a flame. This stage of human evolution laid the groundwork for something even more complex and transformative. Once groups became cohesive, once norms were in place, another layer emerged. A deeper sense of justice, a sense of fairness and reciprocity, a drive to ensure that benefits and burdens were shared in ways that felt right. This next layer would shape not only how early humans lived, but how modern societies still function today. It is one of the most deeply rooted moral instincts we possess. Now we move into this powerful force, one that shaped relationships, economies, and moral systems across all of human history: the evolution of fairness. Fairness is one of humanity's most striking moral intuitions. It appears across cultures, across ages, and even across species. It is the feeling that rewards should match effort, that harm should be addressed, that those who give should receive, and that no one should exploit the generosity of others. Fairness is not merely learned, it is felt. It is embedded deeply in the way humans respond to one another, shaping judgment long before formal rules or ethical theories ever existed. To understand the evolution of fairness, imagine an early human group gathered at the site of a successful hunt. The air is heavy with the smell of fresh meat. The hunters rest, wiping sweat from their brows. Others gather around, waiting for the division of food. This moment is crucial. How the food is shared will influence trust, respect, and future cooperation. A fair division strengthens the group. An unfair division can fracture it. As the meat is distributed, each person watches carefully. They compare their share to others. They take note of who contributed the most to the hunt. They sense whether the distribution feels balanced. If someone takes more than others feel is deserved, subtle tension forms. It need not be spoken. A glance, a frown, a moment of silence. All these are signals that fairness has been breached. Allow a gentle breath here. Fairness is not simply a rule. It is a feeling, a quiet chord that resonates within the body. This fairness instinct has deep evolutionary roots. Primatologists observing chimpanzees found that they too react to unfairness. In controlled experiments, when one chimp receives a lesser reward than another for the same task, it may protest, refuse to continue, or even reject the reward altogether. This behavior shows that fairness, or at least a rudimentary version of it, predates humans. It is part of a broader evolutionary pattern that reinforces cooperation. Fairness evolved because it solves a fundamental problem in social life. Cooperation works best when everyone contributes. If someone takes advantage, benefiting without effort, it threatens the stability of the group. Over time, humans developed emotional responses to unfairness to discourage exploitation and maintain balance. Imagine two individuals working together to gather fruit from a tall tree. One climbs, the other steadies the trunk. When they return to the group, they divide the fruit. Both have invested effort. Both deserve a share. But if one takes more than the other, the cooperation may end. The next time they approach a task, trust will already be weakened. Trust, like fire, must be tended. In early human groups, fairness also shaped long-term relationships. People remembered who shared and who hoarded, who helped and who ignored. These memories influenced future choices, forming a rudimentary social economy where fairness became a kind of currency. Generosity increased status. Sharing built alliances. Fair behavior opened doors to cooperation, partnership, and even mating opportunities. Unfair behavior closed them. Let your breath settle as you imagine this intricate emotional landscape. Fairness was not just a practical solution. It became part of identity, a measure of character, a source of pride or shame. As groups grew larger and more complex, fairness also became more symbolic. It shaped rituals, exchanges, and celebrations. Gift-giving ceremonies, seen in many indigenous cultures, reinforced bonds by emphasizing balanced reciprocity. These traditions likely have roots deep in human evolution, long before writing or formal institutions. Accountability also emerged. Those who consistently violated fairness norms faced consequences. These consequences did not require a formal justice system. They were enacted through gossip, exclusion, ridicule, or withdrawal of cooperation. Social punishment became a powerful tool. It signaled that fairness mattered, not just for individuals, but for the survival of the entire group. Picture a circle of early humans sitting beneath a cluster of trees in the midday heat. They discuss a recent conflict. One person's actions disrupted the harmony of the group. Voices remain calm, but the message is clear. The group expects fairness. The group enforces it. This is not yet law, but it is proto-justice. Fairness also influenced mating and child-rearing. Parents who treated children fairly fostered trust and security. Partners who supported one another created more stable and nurturing environments. Over generations, these behaviors shaped emotional expectations. Fair treatment became synonymous with safety. Humans also developed a sense of proportional fairness, a recognition that some contributions deserve more reward. A skilled hunter, a wise elder, a dedicated caregiver. Fairness did not always mean equal shares. It meant balanced shares. This distinction helped humans build diverse, specialized roles within communities. Take a slow breath here. Notice how fairness evolves from simple reciprocity to a rich moral intuition. It becomes a guide for behavior, a force that binds people together, a foundation for justice systems long before written law. But fairness, empathy, and cooperation alone could not sustain the growing moral complexity of human life. As brains expanded, as social interactions multiplied, and as groups began to settle in larger communities, morality needed a deeper biological infrastructure. In the next part of our journey, we explore how the human brain itself evolved to support moral judgment, how empathy, fairness, and cooperation are wired into the nervous system, how hormones and neural circuits allow us to feel, think, and act in ways that support moral behavior, the biology of morality. To understand morality fully, we must look inward, deep into the architecture of the brain, into the electrical storms of neurons and the chemical currents of emotion, into the quiet biological mechanisms that gave rise to empathy, judgment, fairness, and compassion, long before humans understood what a brain even was. Morality is not simply a cultural invention. It is not merely a set of ideas passed down through stories and traditions. It emerges from the structure of the human nervous system, shaped by millions of years of evolution. Our ability to care, to judge, to cooperate, to forgive, to feel guilt or pride or outrage, all of this is grounded in biology. Imagine the human brain as a vast landscape, valleys of emotion, mountains of reasoning, rivers of memory flowing through networks of cells that communicate through tiny bursts of energy. This landscape was shaped by natural selection to support social life, to help individuals navigate complex relationships, evaluate intentions, predict behavior, and respond appropriately. Take a calm breath here, letting the mind settle as we begin this inward exploration. One of the central structures involved in morality is the prefrontal cortex. Located behind the forehead, this region supports planning, decision-making, impulse control, and the ability to consider long-term consequences. It helps us weigh options, balance emotions with rational thought, and choose actions aligned with our values. When early humans cooperated in hunts or decided how to share resources, the prefrontal cortex played a crucial role in evaluating fairness and regulating impulses that might disrupt group cohesion. Another important region is the amygdala, an almond-shaped cluster of neurons deep within the brain. The amygdala processes emotion, especially fear and threat. It alerts us to danger and influences how we respond to harm. When we witness someone suffering, the amygdala helps generate the emotional resonance that may lead us to comfort them or intervene. In this way, it contributes to the earliest forms of empathy and care. The anterior cingulate cortex, located between emotional and cognitive regions, helps us detect conflict both within ourselves and in social situations. It lights up when we face a difficult decision or when we feel the tension of choosing between selfishness and generosity. It helps us sense when something is wrong, even before we can articulate why. Let your shoulders relax slightly as you imagine these intricate systems working together. Morality is a symphony played across regions of the brain in real time. Another essential player in the biology of morality is the insula. The insula helps us feel internal sensations, the flutter of the heart, the tightening of the stomach, the warmth of compassion. It activates when we experience disgust, guilt, empathy, or admiration. When someone acts unfairly, the insula responds with a visceral reaction, preparing the body to address the violation. It bridges the internal and external worlds, connecting bodily sensations with moral intuition. Beyond brain structures, hormones also shape moral behavior. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, promotes trust, bonding, and generosity. It surges during moments of connection, a parent holding a child, friends embracing, lovers sharing a moment of closeness. Oxytocin strengthens social ties, making cooperation more rewarding and conflict more uncomfortable. Serotonin influences impulses, mood, and decision-making. Higher serotonin levels foster calm, patience, and restraint qualities essential for resolving conflicts peacefully. Low serotonin is associated with aggression and impulsivity, which can disrupt social harmony. Dopamine reinforces behaviors associated with reward. When cooperation leads to positive social outcomes, approval, gratitude, or improved group cohesion, dopamine reinforces these behaviors, making them more likely to occur again. In this way, moral actions become not only good, but pleasurable. Take another gentle breath. The biology of morality reveals that ethical behavior feels good because it benefits both the individual and the group. Mirror neurons also play a central role. These specialized neurons activate both when we perform an action and when we see someone else perform the same action. They create an internal simulation, allowing us to understand not only what others are doing, but why they are doing it and how it feels. Mirror neurons help infants imitate caregivers, help friends understand each other's emotions, and help communities maintain harmony through shared experience. This neural mirroring was crucial in early human societies. It allowed individuals to coordinate movements during hunts, to learn new skills through observation, to share joy and sorrow, and to develop a deeper sense of we. Without mirror neurons, the rich fabric of human social life would unravel. Moral emotions also have biological origins. Guilt arises when we violate internalized norms. Pride emerges when we contribute meaningfully to the group. Shame warns us when we risk losing social connection. Compassion motivates us to act for the welfare of others. These emotions are not abstract concepts. They are physical experiences shaped by neural activity and hormonal responses. Together, these systems form a biological foundation for morality. They allow humans to evaluate harm, fairness, loyalty, honesty, and care. They support the ability to cooperate, resolve conflicts, create alliances, and maintain stable relationships. Imagine early humans gathering around a fire, their brains quietly orchestrating emotions and decisions in each moment. One person comforts another who is grieving. Another shares food with a hungry child. Someone else intervenes to stop a conflict. These acts are shaped by biology, but they are also expressions of something emerging, a sense of moral responsibility. Let your breath settle softly here. The biology of morality shows us that ethical behavior is not separate from who we are. It is part of our very nature, woven into the fabric of our bodies and minds. But biology is only one layer. As humans grew more numerous and more complex, they needed systems to organize behavior at a larger scale. They needed traditions, codes, and principles that extended beyond instincts and emotions. They needed shared guidelines that shaped entire communities. From these needs emerged something transformative, the first ancient moral codes. We now move into the next chapter, where morality steps into the collective world for the first time. Ancient moral codes. As human groups grew larger and more complex, instinct and emotion were no longer enough to maintain harmony. Small tribes of 20 or 30 could rely on personal relationships and immediate consequences to guide behavior. But as populations expanded into hundreds or thousands, new structures were needed. Something more formal, something more enduring, something that could be remembered, taught, and transmitted across generations. This gave rise to the earliest moral code systems of rules, principles, and expectations that shaped the behavior of entire communities. These codes did not appear all at once. They grew slowly, like ancient rivers carving their way through stone. They evolved from unwritten customs into formal guidelines, eventually becoming some of the earliest forms of law. Take a slow, calm breath as we step into this chapter of history. Imagine the warmth of a fire, the murmur of voices, the slow passing of stories from elders to children. This is the world where moral codes began. The first moral codes were not written. They were spoken, whispered, remembered, recited through ritual and story. In early agricultural societies, where humans settled permanently for the first time, the need for shared norms became even stronger. Farming required cooperation, planting, harvesting, storing food, and defending resources. Disputes could threaten survival. So these early communities developed structured expectations. Imagine a small settlement near a river, with huts arranged in a rough circle. Children play at the center. Adults tend to crops or repair tools. At night, the elders gather to discuss conflicts, decide on boundaries, and reinforce traditions. Their words shape how the community understands fairness, responsibility, and respect. These spoken traditions become the seeds of the earliest moral systems. One of the oldest known written moral codes is the Code of Unamu, emerging from Sumer around 4,000 years ago. It outlines principles of justice, fairness, and responsibility within a growing society. Before this code, Sumerian communities relied on shared customs, but as cities expanded, written rules ensured consistency. They addressed theft, injury, marriage, inheritance, and community obligations. These codes did not invent morality, but preserved and formalized what people already felt was right. Let your shoulders soften slightly. Writing allowed morality to travel across time. It anchored fleeting words into durable form. Soon after Unamu came the famous Code of Hammurabi in Babylon. Engraved in stone, it established a structured system of justice based on reciprocity, an early expression of proportional fairness. Though often harsh by modern standards, these laws reflect a deep concern for stability and order. They reveal how early civilizations sought to balance personal responsibility with social harmony. The code sought to protect the vulnerable, regulate commerce, and ensure predictable consequences for wrongdoing. Across the world, other early civilizations developed their own moral frameworks. In ancient Egypt, the concept of Ma'at embodied cosmic order, truth, justice, and balance. Egyptians believed that a harmonious society reflected the harmony of the universe itself. Morality was not just about human behavior, it was woven into the fabric of reality. Imagine a temple in ancient Egypt, sunlight streaming through massive columns carved with symbols of balance and wisdom. Priests maintain rituals to keep Ma'at in equilibrium, while people live by principles of honesty, generosity, and respect. These values shaped both personal behavior and the functioning of the state. In ancient China, early moral foundations began forming long before Confucius. Communities developed shared expectations of harmony, filial respect, and communal responsibility. When Confucius arrived centuries later, he would draw from these ancestral traditions to articulate a moral philosophy that focused on virtue, relationship, and the cultivation of character. In ancient India, early Vedic traditions introduced moral principles tied to cosmic order, truth, and duty. These principles influenced the formation of Hindu ethical thought, emphasizing non-harm, responsibility, and the interconnectedness of all life. Take a gentle breath and let the vastness of these early civilizations wash over you. Each culture developed its own moral vision, yet many shared striking similarities. Honor elders, protect the vulnerable, be fair in trade, respect the community, do not steal, do not murder. These shared values emerged not because societies communicated with one another, but because they responded to universal human needs. As cities grew, as trade expanded, as diverse groups interacted, moral codes became more elaborate. They addressed not only external actions, but also internal intentions. They considered loyalty, honesty, love, and the sacredness of promises. They shaped identity, rituals, and collective memory. But it wasn't only laws and formal codes that carried morality forward. Much of moral teaching flowed through stories, through myths, legends, epics, and fables. Stories reached minds law could not reach. They touched emotion, imagination, and aspiration. They taught not through punishment, but through meaning. Our next chapter explores this powerful realm, the world where morality is woven into the fabric of narrative. Now we step into myth, story, and the moral lessons carried through generations. Myth, story, and moral lessons. Before laws were carved into stone, before philosophers debated ethics in bustling marketplaces, and even before elders recited codes by the fire, humans taught morality through story. Storytelling is older than writing, older than agriculture, older than civilization itself. It is one of the earliest tools humans used to make sense of the world. And in the quiet spaces between words, in the rhythm of shared imagination, morality found a home. Imagine a small group gathered beneath a vast night sky. Stars shimmer overhead. The fire crackles softly. Children lean forward, faces warm in the glow, waiting for the storyteller to begin. The elder clears their throat, breathing slowly. The story unfolds of a hunter who faced greed and learned generosity, of a spirit who punished broken promises, of a traveler who found wisdom in kindness to a stranger. These stories carry lessons not through commands, but through journeys of the imagination. Take a slow, easy breath here. Stories often enter not through the mind, but through the heart. In early human societies, stories served multiple purposes. They entertained, they bonded the community, they preserved history, but most importantly, they communicated values in a way that was memorable and compelling. Long before children understood rules, they understood heroes and villains. They understood the consequences of betrayal and the rewards of courage. They understood empathy through characters who loved, lost, struggled, and grew. Across cultures and continents, stories developed shared themes. Be loyal, respect your elders, help those in need, beware of deceit, honor your word. These messages were universal, not because they were taught in the same ways, but because they expressed the fundamental needs of social living. In many hunter-gatherer communities, morality was embedded in origin stories. These tales explained not only how the world began, but how people should behave within it. They described the relationships between humans, animals, spirits, and the environment. In this sense, moral lessons were woven into cosmology itself. Imagine a story that tells of a great river spirit angered by wasteful behavior. The lesson is clear: respect nature. Or a tale of a trickster who disrupts harmony through selfishness, only to learn humility through their own undoing. These stories taught children, shaped adults, and guided communities in moments of decision. Let your breath soften as you picture these stories drifting through the generation after generation, unchanged in some places and transformed in others, always adapting to the needs of the moment. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh explored themes of friendship, pride, grief, and responsibility. In this early epic, Gilgamesh learns through loss that power without compassion leads to loneliness. In the tale's quiet moments, we glimpse a moral message. Humility makes life meaningful. In ancient Greece, myths played a similar role. The story of Prometheus highlighted sacrifice and defiance. The myth of King Midas warned of greed. Prominent tragedies taught audiences about hubris, justice, and fate. Through drama, Greeks explored the tension between desire and duty, personal ambition, and communal responsibility. In indigenous cultures of the Americas, stories often highlight the interconnectedness of all living things. Animals speak, mountains breathe, rivers teach. The moral implications are profound. Every action resonates through a larger web of life. Across Africa, storytelling traditions carry lessons about resilience, generosity, and the dangers of dishonesty. Trickster figures like Anansi or the hare reveal the complexity of moral thought. Not everything is simple. Wisdom sometimes wears a mischievous face. In ancient India, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata explore themes of honor, loyalty, justice, and moral ambiguity. Characters struggle with duty and desire, confronting the difficulty of making ethical decisions in a complicated world. Throughout China, stories of sages, warriors, and spirits emphasized harmony, family, responsibility, and balance. These tales laid cultural foundations long before Confucian philosophy articulated them. Everywhere, stories served as moral maps. They taught not only what to do, but why. They shaped identity. They forged community. They turned abstract values into emotional experiences, easy to remember and difficult to ignore. Allow a moment of quiet reflection here. Stories do something unique. They bypass resistance. They soften the mind. They open the heart. They let us feel morality, not just understand it. Stories also travel. As trade routes expanded, mythologies began to intermingle. Ideas merged, evolved, and influenced one another. Moral lessons adapted to new environments. As humans encountered strangers with different customs, stories became bridges. They allowed groups to understand one another's values. They created empathy across cultural boundaries. And yet, story alone could not satisfy the growing human need for order, ritual, and absolute meaning. As communities grew into civilizations, people sought frameworks that connected morality to something larger than themselves, something sacred, something eternal. This next transformation was profound. Myth gave rise to the sacred, story deepened into belief, and morality became intertwined with something humans experienced as divine. Now we step gently into the chapter where morality and spirituality converge, religion and moral order. As human societies grew larger, more interconnected, and more complex, something profound began to happen. The stories that once guided small tribes evolved into vast systems of belief. Rituals deepened. Symbols became sacred. The moral lessons once whispered beside the fire became intertwined with visions of gods, ancestors, and cosmic forces. Morality moved from the realm of daily survival into the realm of the divine. Take a soft breath here. This is a turning point in the human story. Religion did not create morality, but religion magnified it, stabilized it, gave it structure, authority, and endurance. It offered answers to questions that instinct and story alone could not fully satisfy. Why must we act rightly? What gives moral rules their power? What holds a community together? What is the meaning behind our obligations to one another? Across cultures, early religions began to codify moral behavior into sacred principles. They framed kindness, fairness, honesty, and loyalty not just as social necessities, but as sacred obligations tied to the fabric of existence itself. Imagine a small temple in ancient Mesopotamia. The air is warm. Incense rises in thin streams. A priest stands before a carved stone tablet, reading aloud laws believed to be inspired by the gods. Listeners stand quietly, absorbing the weight of the words. Morality, once a shared understanding between people, is now connected to a higher power. This gives moral behavior a transcendent force. In ancient Egypt, Ma'at represented truth, justice, and the balance of the cosmos. To act morally was to align oneself with the order of the universe. The weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at symbolized the belief that one's actions echo beyond life. Morality became not only communal, but eternal. Allow your shoulders to soften slightly as you imagine these scenes. Religion provided a broader horizon for moral behavior. Life stretched into the afterlife, and every action carried spiritual significance. In many indigenous traditions around the world, morality is tied to the natural world and ancestral spirits. To harm another person, an animal, or the land itself is to disrupt a sacred relationship. Respect, gratitude, and reciprocity become moral imperatives supported by ritual and cosmology. In ancient India, the concept of dharma emerged, a complex idea encompassing duty, virtue, responsibility, and cosmic order. Dharma guided kings, families, warriors, monks, and children. It shaped how people understood their roles in society and how they treated one another. Morality was woven into the very essence of existence. In ancient China, early religious traditions and ancestor worship established a moral framework based on harmony, respect for elders, and the importance of fulfilling one's role in the family. These ideas would later influence Confucian ethics, giving moral behavior a spiritual and philosophical grounding that shaped Chinese culture for millennia. Take a calm breath. The sacred gave morality durability. It allowed values to outlive individual lives. One of the most significant shifts in the moral history of humanity occurred with the rise of monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam systems that framed morality within the context of a single, all-knowing ethical deity. In these traditions, moral laws became expressions of divine will. Right and wrong were grounded in the character of God. In ancient Israel, moral commandments emphasized justice, compassion, honesty, and care for the vulnerable. These principles guided not just religious rituals, but daily life agriculture, business, family, and community. Early Christianity expanded these ideas, emphasizing compassion, forgiveness, love for enemies, and care for the marginalized. The figure of Jesus served as a moral exemplar, embodying virtues that transcended tribal boundaries. Islam built upon these traditions, articulating a comprehensive moral framework rooted in justice, charity, mercy, and humility. The Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad offered guidance in personal behavior, community ethics, and social responsibility. What is striking across all major religious traditions is not their differences, but their similarities. Each emphasizes compassion. Each emphasizes justice. Each emphasizes honesty, responsibility, and care for others. Each encourages courage in the face of wrongdoing. Each values humility and warns against arrogance. Why do these themes appear everywhere? Because they are rooted in the same evolutionary, emotional, and social foundations that shaped early human morality. Religion amplified the moral instincts already present in human nature. Let your breath soften here. Morality became cosmic. It became sacred. Religion also played another important role. It expanded the circle of moral concern. While early tribes cared primarily about their own members, religions often encouraged kindness to strangers, travelers, the poor, and the oppressed. This broadened sense of community helped societies grow. It allowed cooperation across tribes, cities, and nations. At the same time, religion could also reinforce group identity so strongly that it led to conflict with outsiders. This duality, unifying within, dividing without, is a recurring theme in human history. Yet even in conflict, moral principles shape the boundaries of acceptable behavior. As religious traditions grew, they produced ethics that guided kings and commoners alike. They created rituals that taught values through practice. They offered hope, belonging, accountability, and meaning. But religion was not the only force shaping moral thought. Over time, another great tradition emerged, one that examined morality, not through the lens of the divine, but through the power of human reason. Philosophers began asking questions about virtue, duty, justice, and the good life. They studied morality as a discipline, searching for principles that could guide human behavior independent of myth or divine decree. Now we step into that world, a world of dialogue, contemplation, and rational inquiry, philosophical ethics. As human civilizations grew more complex, as cities rose and trade routes expanded, a new kind of moral inquiry began to take shape. People still relied on tradition, religion, and community values, but some began asking deeper questions. What is the good life? What makes an action right or wrong? How should we treat one another? What does it mean to be virtuous? These questions ushered in an era of reflective, deliberate moral thought, the birth of philosophical ethics. Imagine a bustling ancient city. Markets hum with activity. Scholars gather in shaded courtyards. Young students listen eagerly as elders debate ideas that challenge long-held beliefs. In this environment, morality becomes not merely inherited, but examined, not simply practiced, but understood. Take a soft breath and imagine stepping into one of these early conversations. In ancient Greece, philosophical ethics began with a simple but transformative impulse: to use reason to explore the moral world. Socrates, often seen as the father of Western moral philosophy, challenged people to examine their beliefs. He walked through the marketplace, asking questions that seemed simple at first, but he opened vast landscapes of thought. What is justice? What is courage? What is virtue? With each question, he invited people to look inward, to question assumptions, to recognize that morality is not only about rules, but about character. Socrates believed that a good life requires self-examination, that virtue arises from knowledge, and that doing wrong harms the soul. His approach was gentle, yet relentless. Through dialogue, he encouraged people to cultivate moral wisdom rather than simply follow tradition. Let your breath settle as we move through these ideas. Philosophy slows the pace of thought. It invites reflection. Plato, Socrates' student, expanded these ideas. He saw morality as connected to harmony within the individual and within society. In his view, the soul had different parts, and virtue emerged when these parts worked together in balance. Justice, for Plato, was not only a social principle, but an inner alignment. He introduced the idea that moral truths might be timeless, existing beyond human culture, like patterns waiting to be discovered. Aristotle, Plato's student, took a more grounded approach. He believed morality emerged from habit, practice, and the cultivation of character. The goal of life, he said, was eudaimonia, flourishing, living well, becoming the best version of oneself. Virtues such as courage, generosity, and honesty were not rigid rules, but qualities developed through practice and guided by reason. Aristotle saw morality as a craft, something learned slowly through experience. Allow a gentle breath here. These ideas still shape the way we understand character today. Beyond Greece, profound moral philosophies developed across the world. In ancient China, Confucius emphasized virtue, harmony, and human relationships. Morality, in his view, was rooted in compassion, respect, and the fulfillment of one's roles within the family and society. He taught that kindness, humility, and integrity strengthen both individuals and communities. His ideas shaped Chinese culture for millennia, guiding moral behavior through education, ritual, and self-cultivation. Taoist philosophy took a different approach. It emphasized naturalness, balance, and the flow of life. Morality was not about rigid rules, but about harmony with the Tao, the underlying order of the universe. Compassion, moderation, and humility were central virtues. Taoist thought encouraged people to act gently, to respect the rhythms of life, and to avoid unnecessary force. In ancient India, philosophical traditions such as Buddhism and Jainism brought profound insights into moral behavior. Buddhism emphasized compassion, mindfulness, and the understanding that suffering arises from attachment. Moral conduct was seen as a path to liberation, a way of reducing suffering for oneself and others. Jainism pushed the principle of non-harm to extraordinary depth, seeing every action as carrying moral weight. Let your breath soften for a moment. These traditions remind us that morality often begins with awareness of our intentions, our actions, and the experiences of others. In the Middle East, Islamic philosophers integrated reason, spirituality, and ethics in ways that influenced the world for centuries. Thinkers such as Al-Farabi, Avicenna, and Al-Ghazali explored how reason and revelation work together, seeing moral behavior as a combination of virtue, wisdom, and spiritual alignment. They emphasized justice, charity, humility, and the pursuit of knowledge. Across Africa, rich moral philosophies emerged within diverse cultures. Many emphasized community, interconnectedness, and the value of human relationships. Concepts like Ubuntu, I am because we are, express a deeply relational view of morality, highlighting compassion, generosity, and the idea that one's humanity is intertwined with the humanity of others. Over time, philosophical ethics diversified even further. In medieval Europe, thinkers such as Thomas Aquinas blended Christian theology with Aristotelian reasoning, arguing that morality arises from both divine guidance and rational understanding. In the Enlightenment, philosophers sought universal principles grounded in human reason. Immanuel Kant argued that morality arises from duty and rationality. According to him, an action is moral when it follows a principle that could be applied to everyone equally. This idea, the universal moral law, shaped modern concepts of human rights and justice. Meanwhile, thinkers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill proposed that morality should be based on consequences, seeking the greatest happiness for the greatest number. This view, utilitarianism, continues to influence debates about ethics in medicine, economics, and public policy. Take a calm breath here, noticing how each tradition adds another layer to the human understanding of morality. The diversity of philosophical ethics shows that morality is not fixed. It evolves, it adapts, it expands as societies grow and as human understanding deepens. Philosophy encourages us to think carefully, to question assumptions, to refine our moral judgments, and to act with greater clarity. But morality is not only about theories or principles. It is also personal. It is emotional. It is tied to how we see ourselves, to our identity, our values, our capacity for shame, guilt, pride, and moral intuition. In the next chapter, we turn inward again, this time to explore how morality becomes part of the self, how it shapes our sense of who we are, how we carry it within us, even when no one is watching. Morality and the self. Morality is not only a set of rules or principles that guide a society. It is also something that lives within each of us. It shapes how we see ourselves, how we act when no one is watching, how we judge our own behavior, and how we navigate the emotional landscape of guilt, pride, shame, and integrity. To understand morality fully, we must explore the inner world, the quiet place where instincts, emotions, memories, and identity intertwine. Take a gentle breath here. This chapter invites a slower, more reflective pace. Imagine waking in the early light of dawn, before the world stirs, before conversation or obligation or movement. There is simply awareness. In this awareness lies the foundation of the self, a sense of being someone, of having a personal history, of having intentions, hopes, and fears. Morality becomes part of this inner identity, shaping how we feel about our choices. Early in life, long before children understand rules or philosophy, they experience moral emotions. A toddler who accidentally hurts a friend may look distressed, sensing the disruption of connection. A child who sneaks extra treats might hide or look away, feeling the first stirrings of guilt. These reactions are not taught. They emerge naturally from empathy and social awareness. As children grow, they internalize expectations from parents, caregivers, and peers. Praise and warmth reinforce behaviors that strengthen relationships. Disapproval or disappointment signals that something has disrupted the social bond. Over time, these external signals become internal voices, a conscience developing quietly in the background. Let your shoulders soften. Think of conscience not as a judgmental force, but as a guide shaped by years of lived experience. One of the deepest moral emotions is guilt. Guilt is not about punishment. It is about recognition, a feeling that we have fallen short of our values or harmed someone we care about. Guilt motivates repair. It draws us toward apology, amends, and renewed connection. It strengthens relationships by acknowledging our capacity to do better. Shame, though often intertwined with guilt, has a different function. Shame is a feeling that something is wrong not with our action, but with ourselves. It triggers a desire to hide, to withdraw, to protect oneself from exposure. While painful, shame also plays an important role in moral development. It helps individuals sense when their behavior threatens belonging, but when shame becomes overwhelming or disconnected from real wrongdoing, it can hinder growth rather than guide it. Take a calm, spacious breath. These emotions arise from our need for connection. They remind us that we are relational beings. Another key component of the moral self is pride. Not arrogant pride, but the quiet satisfaction that comes from doing something good, generous, or brave. Pride encourages us to act in ways that align with our values. It fosters confidence in our ability to contribute meaningfully to the world. In early human societies, this moral pride strengthened group bonds. Today, it helps individuals build a sense of purpose. As we mature, morality becomes intertwined with identity. We think of ourselves as honest or dishonest, compassionate or indifferent, loyal or unreliable. These self-concepts guide our choices. When actions contradict them, we feel internal conflict. This conflict is the tension between who we are and who we wish to be. Imagine someone facing a difficult decision whether to speak out about wrongdoing, to help someone in need, or to admit a mistake. The decision is not only about consequences. It is about the kind of person they believe themselves to be. Morality becomes a mirror, reflecting both our strengths and our struggles. Let a moment of quiet settle. Morality is a dialogue between our actions and our identity. The self also holds moral intuitions, rapid, instinctive judgments about right and wrong. These intuitions emerge from a lifetime of experiences, emotions, and cultural learning. They happen before conscious reasoning. For example, witnessing cruelty may evoke immediate disgust. Observing kindness may spark warmth or admiration. These feelings guide behavior quickly, often before thought catches up. But morality is not only intuitive. Humans also develop moral reasoning, the ability to think through dilemmas, weigh competing values, and justify decisions. Reasoning allows us to challenge instinct, overcome bias, and act in accordance with broader principles. Think for a moment about the tension between intuition and reasoning. Sometimes they align, sometimes they clash. This interplay shapes much of moral life, giving humans both flexibility and depth. The self also carries a moral narrative, the story we tell ourselves about who we are and why our actions matter. This narrative changes over time. A person might see themselves as someone who helps others, or someone who seeks truth, or someone who protects loved ones. These moral identities influence daily behavior more powerfully than abstract principles. Let your breath fall softly. These inner stories are part of what makes morality human. But morality within the self also has a darker side. Humans have the capacity for empathy and compassion, but also for cruelty and indifference. The same emotions that guide moral behavior can be twisted by fear, anger, or insecurity. Shame can lead to denial instead of growth. Loyalty can justify wrongdoing. Pride can fuel arrogance. Understanding this inner complexity is essential. It reminds us that morality is not static. It is dynamic, shaped by circumstances, by relationships, and by the ongoing evolution of the self. As we move to the next chapter, we will explore this dual nature more directly. Why humans sometimes act with extraordinary kindness and at other times with devastating harm. What causes people to help strangers and what drives cruelty? Why good people sometimes do bad things and how moral psychology reveals both the light and shadow in human behavior. Now we step into the psychology of good and evil. The psychology of good and evil. Human beings carry within them an extraordinary range of moral potential. The same species capable of profound compassion, sacrifice, and empathy is also capable of cruelty, indifference, and violence. To understand morality fully, we must reckon with both sides, the forces that draw us toward goodness and the forces that pull us toward harm. Take a slow, steady breath as we begin this exploration. This chapter moves through deep terrain, but always with clarity and grounding. Imagine standing at the edge of human behavior, looking out over a vast landscape. In one direction, you see acts of kindness that defy logic, strangers risking their lives for others, communities helping the vulnerable, individuals choosing compassion, even in moments of suffering. In another direction, you see acts of harm, aggression, neglect, manipulation, and cruelty. Both directions belong to the human condition. Both emerge from the same nervous system, the same emotions, the same capacities shaped by evolution. To understand why humans help, we begin with empathy. Empathy allows us to feel the pain of others, to mirror their emotions, to imagine their experiences. When someone helps a stranger, empathy often plays a central role. It creates a bridge between isolated selves. It motivates altruism, the desire to improve another's well-being, even at personal cost. But empathy alone cannot explain all acts of goodness. Sometimes people help because of moral identity, the belief that they are the kind of person who should help. Sometimes they help because they belong to a community that values generosity. Sometimes they help because doing good brings a sense of meaning or fulfillment. Sometimes they help because their upbringing nurtured a compassionate worldview. Let your shoulders relax slightly. Goodness often arises from a combination of instinct and intention. Humans also have a deep capacity for cooperation. Millions of years of social living shaped brains built for connection. When people feel part of something larger, a family, a tribe, a team, a community, they are more likely to act in the interest of others. Cooperation strengthens bonds and enhances survival, making pro-social behavior both emotionally rewarding and evolutionarily advantageous. Another force behind moral behavior is moral reasoning. When humans step back from immediate impulses and think carefully about their actions, they can choose kindness even when emotions pull in other directions. They can prioritize values, principles, or long-term consequences. This capacity for reflection allows individuals to override selfish instincts and act nobly. Take a quiet breath. Goodness often flows from awareness. Now we turn toward the other side, the forces that lead to harm. Violence and cruelty have deep evolutionary roots. Early humans often faced scarcity, threats, and competition. These pressures shaped aggressive instincts meant to protect resources, family, and territory. Even today, these instincts can surface under stress, fear, or insecurity. One powerful driver of harmful behavior is fear. When people feel threatened physically, emotionally, or socially, they may lash out. Fear narrows perception, reducing empathy and amplifying defensive reactions. It creates an us versus them mindset that can justify cruelty toward outsiders. Anger is another force. Anger can arise from perceived injustice, betrayal, or disrespect. While anger can motivate positive change when channeled constructively, it can also lead to impulsive harm when left unchecked. Take a breath and let it fall easily. These emotions are natural, but require understanding to guide them well. Humans also have a tendency toward dehumanization. When people see others as less than fully human, as objects, enemies, or abstractions, empathy diminishes. This makes harmful behavior more possible. Dehumanization occurs in war, discrimination, propaganda, and even in everyday conflicts when someone reduces another to a category instead of a person. Another factor is social influence. Humans are deeply shaped by the groups they belong to. Peer pressure, authority, and cultural norms can all lead people to act against their own moral compass. This explains why individuals sometimes commit harmful acts they would never choose alone. Let your breath soften. Social influence can lift us toward goodness or pull us toward harm. Moral disengagement is another psychological process that allows people to justify wrongdoing. By reframing harmful actions as necessary, deserved, or harmless, individuals can relieve themselves of guilt. This mechanism appears in personal conflicts, political movements, and even daily rationalizations. Yet it is important to recognize that even harmful behavior often emerges from psychological needs, the need for belonging, control, recognition, or security. Understanding these needs does not excuse harm, but it reveals the complexity of human behavior. Humans also possess moral blind spots, areas where intuition fails or where biases distort judgment. In-group favoritism, prejudice, and stereotyping can lead individuals to treat some people with compassion and others with indifference. And yet, despite all these forces, humans continually strive toward goodness. They build systems of justice, education, and compassion. They form movements for equality, peace, and human rights. They reflect on their mistakes, seek forgiveness, and work toward growth. Allow a gentle pause. The psychology of good and evil shows that morality is not fixed, but fluid, shaped by circumstance, emotion, and awareness. Understanding moral psychology helps us act with greater clarity. It reminds us to question assumptions, to cultivate empathy, to reflect before reacting, and to recognize the shared humanity in others. As societies evolve, so too do their moral norms. What once seemed acceptable becomes unacceptable. What once seemed unimaginable becomes necessary. The next chapter explores this dynamic process, how morality changes over time, and how cultures reshape their ethical landscapes across centuries. Now we step into the flow of history, into the evolution of moral norms through generations. Moral change. Morality is not static. It is not a fixed set of rules etched permanently into the human story. It moves, it evolves, it reshapes itself across centuries as cultures grow, technologies shift, values collide, and human understanding deepens. To study moral change is to watch humanity learn in slow motion, to witness how our sense of right and wrong expands, contracts, transforms, and adapts. Take a soft, unhurried breath here. This chapter moves through time, tracing the long arc of moral evolution. Imagine standing at the edge of history, watching human societies stretch across continents and generations. Each culture holds its own moral expectations, its own sense of virtue and vice, shaped by its environment, traditions, and collective experiences. Yet no culture remains exactly the same. Values shift, priorities evolve. Behaviors once taken for granted become questioned, challenged, and overturned. Consider the earliest human groups. Their moral norms centered around survival, sharing resources, protecting kin, resolving conflicts, and maintaining group harmony. But as humans formed villages, towns, and cities, morality expanded to include justice, property, governance, and social responsibility. The agricultural revolution reshaped moral expectations around work, land, inheritance, and gender roles. The rise of writing allowed moral ideas to travel across generations with far more precision and stability. Let your shoulders relax as you reflect on these vast transformations. Moral evolution is inseparable from cultural evolution. One of the most significant forces driving moral change is empathy, the widening of the moral circle. In early societies, moral concern often focused on family or tribe. Outsiders were treated with caution or hostility. But as trade, migration, and communication linked diverse groups together, people began to recognize shared humanity across boundaries. Empathy expanded the circle from kin to tribe, from tribe to city, from city to nation, and ultimately toward all of humanity. This widening circle underpins many of the greatest moral shifts in history. Another major force is reason. Philosophers, scholars, and thinkers questioned tradition, examined moral principles, and debated what it means to live well. These reflections often sparked change, challenging inherited norms and opening space for new moral insights. Let a gentle breath soften your chest. Change often begins with a question. Consider moral revolutions throughout history. Practices once accepted or ignored became subjects of intense ethical scrutiny. Slavery, once almost universal, became morally unacceptable in much of the world as ideas about human dignity and equality grew. Women's rights expanded as societies began to recognize gender equality not as a threat to tradition, but as a moral imperative. The rights of children transformed dramatically, moving from property-like treatment to protections rooted in their well-being. The treatment of animals also shifted. Many cultures now recognize animal welfare as a moral concern, a reflection of expanding empathy and a deeper understanding of suffering. Environmental ethics emerged as humans realized their impact on the planet. The idea that future generations have moral claims on the present is a relatively new development, one made possible by increased global awareness and scientific insight. Take a moment to breathe. Moral change is not only about correction, but expansion, new understanding, revealing new responsibilities. Technology also plays a powerful role in moral evolution. The printing press spread ideas faster than ever before, allowing ethical debates to transcend borders. The internet accelerated this process exponentially, exposing people to diverse perspectives and amplifying voices that once went unheard. At the same time, technology creates new dilemmas: privacy, autonomy, digital rights, and the impact of artificial intelligence. Migration and cultural exchange have long spurred moral change. When people encounter unfamiliar customs, they question their own norms. They adapt, blend, resist, or transform. Morality evolves through contact, through conversation, through the recognition that what seems natural in one culture may be unusual in another. Conflict also drives moral progress. Wars and social struggles force societies to confront injustice and rethink their values. In the aftermath of conflict, many communities develop stronger commitments to peace, cooperation, and human rights. But moral change is not always linear or progressive. Sometimes societies regress. Fear, scarcity, or instability can narrow the moral circle rather than widen it. Tribalism resurges. Prejudice finds new forms. Old hierarchies reassert themselves. This ebb and flow is part of the human story, a reminder that morality is fragile and must be actively cultivated. Let your breath soften. Moral change requires both vigilance and hope. One of the most powerful engines of moral evolution is youth. Young generations often question the norms they inherit. They see injustices that older generations accept. They push boundaries, imagine new possibilities, and challenge traditions. Over time, their ideas influence culture, law, and identity. Education also shapes moral change. Access to knowledge, critical thinking, and diverse perspectives strengthens moral awareness. It encourages individuals to consider not only their own interests, but the well-being of others. Another key element is moral imagination, the ability to envision a more just world. Poets, storytellers, reformers, and ordinary people dream of societies where kindness is common, fairness is expected, and cruelty is unthinkable. These visions inspire collective movements that reshape moral norms. Take a breath and let it fall naturally. Moral change is often slow, but it is real. As we look at the arc of history, one pattern becomes clear. Humanity is capable of profound moral growth. We extend compassion beyond our immediate circles. We refine our understanding of justice. We build institutions that protect the vulnerable. We learn from mistakes. We strive to become better. Yet the journey is not complete. New technologies, global challenges, and interconnected societies create moral questions our ancestors could not have imagined. What does morality mean in a world shaped by artificial intelligence, by climate change, by global migration, by biotechnology, by instantaneous communication, by unprecedented levels of interdependence? To answer these questions, we must look forward. We must imagine what morality might become in the future, how it might expand, adapt, and guide humanity through the unfolding chapters of history. Now we move gently into that horizon. Closing reflections. Morality began long before written words, long before cities, long before organized religion or philosophical debate. It began in the quiet exchanges between early humans who looked at one another and felt something stir, a flicker of recognition, of connection, of shared vulnerability. From those first sparks of empathy grew the vast moral landscapes we know today. Take a slow, gentle breath here. Let your awareness settle softly. As we reach the end of this long journey, it becomes clear that morality is not a single idea or invention. It is a tapestry woven across millions of years. It lives in the architecture of the brain, in the stories we tell, in the rituals we practice, in the communities we build, and in the choices we make. It grows from instincts shaped by evolution, from emotions shaped by experience, and from meanings shaped by culture. Morality is both deeply personal and profoundly collective. It is the whisper of conscience in moments of solitude, and the collective voice of humanity striving toward justice. It is the inner tension we feel when we hurt someone, and the quiet pride that rises when we act with kindness. It is the bond that holds families together, the glue that binds societies, and the aspiration that guides civilizations. Imagine for a moment the entirety of human history stretching before you. Early hominins gathering around fires, ancient cities rising from dust, scribes carving laws into stone, storytellers teaching through myth, philosophers debating in open squares, religious traditions building moral worlds rooted in the sacred, communities changing, expanding, and redefining what it means to live well. All of these moments are part of the same unfolding story, the story of humanity learning how to care. Let your breath fall softly, as if resting on the horizon of that long history. We often think of morality as a set of answers, but it is just as much a set of questions. What kind of world do we want to live in? What kind of people do we want to become? How do we hold compassion in one hand and courage in the other? How do we seek justice without losing humility? How do we honor our own needs while protecting the well-being of others? These questions are not obstacles. They are invitations. They call us to awareness, to connection, to growth. The future of morality will require imagination. It will require empathy extended across cultures, species, and generations. It will require wisdom drawn from science, philosophy, spirituality, and lived experience. And it will require the courage to continue evolving, even when change is difficult. Take one more calm, unhurried breath. Morality, at its heart, is the story of connection, the understanding that our lives touch one another in ways both visible and invisible. It invites us to see ourselves not as isolated beings, but as part of a larger whole. As this journey comes to a close, imagine humanity not as a collection of individuals, but as a single, vast community stretching across time, each generation learning from the last, each generation adding new insight, new compassion, new understanding, each generation refining the art of living together. Morality is the thread that runs through it all. It guides us toward goodness, even when the path is unclear. It reminds us that kindness matters, that fairness matters, that empathy matters, that the smallest gesture can ripple outward in ways we cannot predict. This is the origin of morality, and it is also its destination, an ongoing journey toward a world shaped by understanding, compassion, curiosity, and care. Let the quiet settle for a moment. Let the breath flow softly, and let the story rest in the space around you, ready to continue in your own life, in your own choices, in your own reflections. The journey of morality is never truly finished. It unfolds with each new day, each new generation, and each new heart willing to imagine a better world.